I think I came out of the womb codependent. And my mother said to me, Karen, I think it's my fault you're an alcoholic. I think the hardest truth was that I would never be able to change another person.
50 years ago, a woman sat down to journal. She was newly sober, still fragile, still finding her way back to herself. She had no idea she was writing a book. She had no idea that book would sell over 4 million copies. And she had no idea that her words would become the first thing millions of women reached for every single morning. Our guest today is Karen Casey, PhD, best-selling author of 30 books, and the woman the world calls the godmother of women in recovery. Her first book, Each Day, A New Beginning, was the very first daily meditation book written specifically for women in recovery. And 40 years later, it is still changing lives. But here's what I love most about Karen. She's not just writing about the journey. She is still on it, still showing up, still walking alongside women who are finding their way back to themselves, just like she once did. Karen, we are so honored to have you in the Generations Woven Circle today. Welcome.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm so delighted to be here and honored to be invited to be a part of this group.
You know, it's great. At first, I just want to take us back to how we even were able to get connected with you. And so I would love, Judy, if you could just share the story of Karen and how she has touched your life and that first little book that you got that connected you with her.
You know, I was thinking, Karen, the very first Each Day a New Beginning doesn't have your name on the front of the book
That's true. It doesn't.
because I've been reading you since it came out every single morning. But I had a chance to go to a, excuse me, a women's conference near Chicago. But one of the girls I worked with said, "Would you like to go to this conference?" I said, "Well, who's at it?" And I saw your name and I go, "Yes, I got to see her. I've been waking up to her every morning for years." And so we went early. We got there and we were a couple of the first people there. And we got our place right down by the front. And here comes this little sparky little gal coming across and she goes, "Good morning, girls. I'm Karen Casey." And I'm going, "I've been waking up to you every morning for years." And that's how it started. And then we connected again and again and again. And so blessed to have you in my life.
Oh, thank you, Judy. And you know, the reason that my name wasn't on the book initially was because Hazelden didn't want me to put my name on the book. They wanted to keep it anonymous just because I don't even remember the reason anymore, but they didn't want a name on it. And because I was in recovery, I wanted to honor the anonymity as well. So for both of those reasons, we didn't have the name on it. But the reason the name then finally was put on the book is that when the book started appearing in bookstores came to Hazelden and said, you know, we have to catalog these books according to the name of the author. So you're going to need to find out who this author is. And of course, they knew who the author was. So that's how the name ended up being on the book finally.
I always wondered what the reasoning was, but that makes
Yeah.
sense. Yeah. Yeah. Well, you definitely have to take some credit in my growth because you're who I turn to every morning.
Well, thank you, Judy.
Yeah.
Actually, I'll give that credit to God.
Amen. Karen, I have a question for you. So before you became this best-selling author, 30 books, and we just heard today that there's another one in the works. So it doesn't look like you're going to stop anytime soon. Who were you before having this life of a writer? And what would surprise most people about your early life? Things that they might not know about you.
I guess I would say I was filled with a lot of fear and insecurity before I became a writer, before, all of that kind of evolved out of my graduate school experiences. And that evolved because my first husband left me for another woman. You know how everything in our life has something precedes an event that then moves us into a new direction. And I was married for 12 years to another alcoholic, and he left me for another woman. And at that period of time, I thought, oh, what am I going to do now with my life? I was an elementary teacher. I loved teaching, but I just felt like I needed something different in my life. And I decided, and he had been in graduate school. That's why we had moved from Indiana to Minnesota, in fact, for him to go to graduate school. And so I thought, well, I'll just give graduate school a try. And what I discovered in graduate school was that I absolutely loved the writing process. And I never had any idea that would be the case. As an undergraduate, I was such a party girl at Purdue University that I used to hire one of my sorority sisters to write my papers for me. I would pay her $5. Her name was Beverly, and I would pay her $5 and she would write my papers for me because I was too busy partying to write them. So writing had never been my cup of tea. And in graduate school, writing has to become your cup of tea. But I didn't have any idea I even knew how to write. And I had this miraculous discovery that writing just flowed out of me. It was like I never ever even had an outline for any paper I wrote. I would just sit down and it would begin to flow. And that's the lucky thing for me. That's how it's been every book I've ever written. It has just flown. But I think that when I look at my life, every struggle, as I said, every struggle I had along the way opened the door to something that was pretty spectacular. But to having the love of writing set me up for becoming a writer ultimately after I finished my doctorate at the University of Minnesota. Everything in our life really is connected in that way. One thing leads to another thing, and that leads to another thing. And pretty soon, you grow old with a whole long list of experiences behind you. And every one of them has grown out of what came before. Because it was at about this time, before I wrote my dissertation, that I ended up in recovery. I had gone to see a counselor, and I don't even know what made her think that I had a problem with alcohol because I was a straight A student. I was and I was teaching at the university. I was pretty high functioning. So I'm not sure what made her think I had a problem with alcohol. But we got into a discussion about it. And she said, why don't you give AA a try? And again, it was just something that grew out of a suggestion. I went to that first AA meeting and it changed my life.
How many years ago, Karen?
Well, I celebrated 50 years this past May. So that was 50 years ago, May 24th, 1976, that I went to my first AA meeting. And I never went to treatment. I just fell in love with AA from the very get-go. It was unlike any experience I had ever had to go into a meeting like that of a couple hundred people and immediately feel that sense of comfort. Part of my struggle throughout my life had been not feeling comfortable in so many situations. And that's what turned me to alcohol. I took my first drink at age 13, and it was whiskey and Coke. And I took that first drink because I was in a setting with a family setting, a family party, and I was so uncomfortable. that I don't even know what gave me the idea to take a drink of whiskey and Coke, but I did and immediately felt this sense of comfort. And so I had from then on turned to alcohol for that feeling of comfort. Well, I went into that first AA meeting and it was like I felt that same level of comfort that I had felt from that first drink of alcohol. And so for me, sticking with AA was real easy because I wanted to continue feeling that level of comfort. For me, 50 years, I mean, it's a long time, that's for sure. I mean, it kind of astounds me when I think, oh my God, 50 years have gone by. It makes me feel pretty old, I'll tell you, that 50 years have gone by.
I think about it when you share the story of you being 37 when you went through this and you went to AA and became sober. It just makes me think of that you say it's 50 years, but like I'm 38. Like I just turned 38 this year. So I think of the life that you've lived in 50 years, and it shows me that I've got so much opportunity left in my life to achieve things considering you like everything that you've accomplished. But my question is, what made you decide to get into hosting your own AAs? Like now you're helping other people. Like, did that come from uh how did you come about to decide to get into that and focus on that?
Well, yes, I host meetings on Zoom
Yeah.
for people, and all of that started, of course, with COVID when we switched to Zoom for AA meetings. Otherwise, I've always just been like everybody else, just going to meetings. But with COVID, I decided to get my own Zoom number because I simply wanted to be helpful to other people. I started some meetings for other people to come to. And that's what I've continued to do. So I have, a lot of meetings that I host and a lot of meetings that I go to, both Al-Anon and AA. Al-Anon has been as crucial to me in some respects as AA over all these years. I went to Al-Anon, in fact, before I ever went to AA because my codependency was so severe, really. And I went to my first Al Anon meeting in 1974.
Can you
And,
explain to our listeners what Al-Anon is?
first and foremost, it was started by Lois, Bill W.'s wife. And Bill W. started Alcoholics Anonymous, and his wife Lois started Al Anon. But Al Anon is really designed to help people learn how to live their own lives. I mean, it really is very focused on codependency. Codependency, I consider a very serious disease, much like alcoholism, because the codependent is so focused on other people and the behavior of other people and trying to control the behavior of other people. And so Al Anon has really been designed to help people back away from trying to control the behavior of others. And as I say, it was initially started for the women of alcoholic men so that they could learn how to just realize that they could not control that person's drinking.
Mm. Yeah, I didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah. And there are meetings called Codependence Anonymous too, along with Al Anon, but it's really focused on taking a look at our own behavior and learning what we can control, what is ours to control, and what is not ours to control. And other people are never ours to control. And that's what Al Anon is designed to help people with.
How would you define codependency today? And do you think young people struggle with it the same ways you did?
I think that all people struggle with it. because I think that all people get trapped into that idea. If only I could change him, if only I could change her, then I would be happy. I would feel more at ease. And so I think that codependency hasn't really changed as far as what it does. I think that young people today struggle with codependency in the same way that I struggled with it when I was a young person. And my codependent struggle started when I was a little kid. You know, I was always watching other people to see if I was okay. And that's a clear sign of codependency, watching others to see if we're okay, watching others to see if we need to change ourselves so that maybe they like us better, or watching others to figure out if is there a way that I can change that person so that we get along better. And so that's goes back to my early childhood. You know, I was always watching other people to see if everything was going to be okay. And like I say, that's why that drink of whiskey and Coke at age 13 was such a miraculous turnaround for me, because I suddenly, it lessened my anxiety. You know, I think that that's why so many people turn to alcohol and or drugs. They're trying to lessen their own anxiety. And so often it's anxiety about the behavior of other people.
Wow. What, Karen, what would you say, what was the hardest truth that you ever had to accept about yourself?
Well, that's a tough question. The hardest truth. I think the hardest truth was that I would never be able to change another person.
Wow.
And you know,
Wow.
because I think that and that's what I mean when I say codependency is at the heart. I think I was codependent. I think I was born codependent. And when I say that, let me explain what I mean. You know, in my family of origin, my dad, I have two older sisters who are both passed away now, but I have two older sisters, and my dad really wanted a son. And so he really wanted, and my mother, her first two pregnancies had been very, very difficult. And she didn't really want another child, but my dad wanted a son desperately. So she got pregnant again. And so the whole time she carried me, she was pretty resistant to the idea of having another pregnancy. And so I think that I came out of the womb clinging to her. I think I came out of the womb codependent. And the truth of that was really brought home to me when I had been sober about a year, because I went back to my hometown of Lafayette to talk to both of my parents about about their lives and about my childhood. And my mother said to me, she apologized to me and said, "Karen, I think it's my fault you're an alcoholic." And I said, "Why would you say that?" And she said, "Because I never wanted you when I was pregnant for you."
Oh my
And
gosh.
and she cried and cried and cried, and I held her in my arms and said, "Mother, it's not your fault I'm an alcoholic." But you know, the thing that happened as a result of that experience, you guys, is that my mother and I developed a real closeness, a real fondness for each other. And and but that's why I think that I really came out of the womb codependent. So from the time I was a little child, I was always looking to try to cling to somebody. And nobody wants to be held hostage. And so I really struggled with that. And again, that's why alcohol at such a young age was so appealing to me, because then I didn't care. It lessened all of that anxiety.
Wow, that is profound. Thank you for sharing that. Wow.
Makes
Well, you
sense.
know, I think that we don't stop and think about the power that codependency can have in our lives, particularly when we're thinking about alcoholism, we think about alcoholism in being the primary disease. And it is a primary disease for sure. And it was a primary disease for me. But codependency, my codependency was every bit as paramount as my alcoholism. And that's why throughout my entire recovery, I have continued to go to Al-Anon. Even today, after 50 years, I go to 2 Al-Anon meetings a week. I go to 4 AA meetings a week. So, I'm very, very committed to both programs, even after all these years.
You found a community in it too, right?
Yeah, that is for sure. I love the community of AA and Al-Anon because, we don't even know each other's last names. I sit here and think, I think, I mean, I know your last name, Judy, but so often we don't know each other's last names, and yet we know each other's story. We know what makes each other hurt. We know what's going on inside of each other. We know each other's heart. And, one of the things that I love about, um, I have a Saturday morning meeting. It's a mixed meeting of men and women, and I've been going to it for 45 years. And some of those men in that meeting, Saturday after Saturday, maybe cry as they're telling some story about their lives or something that happened to them that week. Well, you don't see that in other circles of our lives. And so there's something so incredibly intimate about an AA meeting or an Al Anon meeting when people let you see them so clearly. And so that's what I love so much about AA and Al Anon too. It's like we're not hiding from each other. It's the one place you're gonna be exposed always to the truth of who everybody is that's there.
I wanted to throw in years ago, a friend of mine wanted me to go to ACOA, which is Adult Children of Alcoholics. It's a 12-step program also. And I went just, to go with her. And what I didn't realize, background, my father was a horrible drunk for many, many years and then got sober. And then I came along in their mid 40s. But what I didn't realize until I attended that meeting is even though my father had been sober for many years, a lot of the dynamics of the relationship with being married to an alcoholic continued. And I found out that what I thought was totally normal was pretty dysfunctional, actually. And it really opened my eyes to a lot of the things, and a lot of it was codependence because I was hanging on for dear life. My folks got a divorce when I was 12, and I just felt abandoned. No other word for it. And so it helped me along the way. It was a 12-step program, but it's the same comfort I felt the first time I went to that. It was like I belong somewhere.
Yes. Yes, I know that feeling. I can remember so well in both the meetings that I went to for the first time. I walked in and it was a room full of utter strangers, and yet I felt like I knew them because I felt like I knew what was going on inside their hearts. And there was just that sense that they knew me even though they had never seen me before. It's pretty amazing.
So many women today have struggled, and they struggle with feelings of not good enough or inadequacy. Why do you think so many women find it difficult to believe that they are worthy of love?
Okay, really quick. Over 7,000 people watch Generations Woven every month, but only a tiny percentage of you are actually subscribed. If you've ever watched an episode and thought, wow, I needed that, please hit subscribe. It's free and it takes 2 seconds, and it genuinely helps us grow, bring on amazing guests, and reach more women looking for connection, healing, and real conversations. Thank you.
that they are worthy to be loved, or that they can be loved?
That's a hard question. I think in this society, there's something that we do to people, particularly to women, where we kind of set them up for feeling unworthy. I mean, just take a look at the commercials on television. I mean, people are always encouraged to compare themselves, and we always feel as though we're coming up short. I don't think my husband looks at a commercial and has the same reaction whatsoever when he's looking at a man in a commercial. But I think that, we're just, from the time we're little girls, we are exposed to that feeling of just not measuring up to our friends in the classroom, not measuring up to the people we see in commercials, not measuring up to the people we see in the magazines we're looking at. So I think that we really breed that sense of unworthiness into women, and I don't know that that's ever going to change. I think that we just have to keep telling ourselves and reminding one another, helping one another to realize that take we don't have to think of ourselves as unworthy. We have to help each other realize, by helping to educate one another. And I think that when we realize for ourselves that we're as worthy as we choose to be, that we're serving as a role model for other young women, or old women too. And I think that that's helpful to change that whole attitude. But I think that that's what gets bred into us as youngsters.
And I think, Norina, that very much ties into what you have shared in the past with your siblings, right? Comparing yourself even within your own family unit, and then you coming now to where you are beautiful and you are smart. And I think, it's sharing that we can overcome that. Because I had the same thing with my sister. I wasn't judging myself against magazines or other people. I was judging against my sibling.
I'm sure that that's true. Yeah, I think that that probably happens all the time. And, now that you mention it, for sure, I judged myself against my two older sisters. And they seemed, I mean, my parents seemed to, I don't know that I don't think for a minute my parents liked them any better than they liked me. But I was always kind of the bad kid in the family. I was always the one that was getting into trouble in the family. And and uh so I would compare myself to my sisters in that regard, that somehow I wasn't measuring up because they weren't getting into trouble and I was.
Did you ever get in trouble when you were little?
Oh, I did. I mean, I was just kind of a naughty kid, you know, and then, when it kind of set me up. I mean, you guys, I think about going into my uncle's grocery store when I was like 10 years old and stealing candy. I realized that this is going to go out. Other people are going to hear this and they're going to say, oh my God, Karen was a thief from the time she was a little girl. But, I realized that I did all kinds of things when I was a little kid.
Well, we all have a past, right? And I think that's what's so beautiful is we make mistakes. I mean, I remember stealing as well, and I got caught by my mom, and she made me go into the gas station, tell them that I stole this thing, and I had to like give it back. But other times I didn't get caught other times. So I'm with you, Karen. I made some decisions when I was younger, but it definitely shaped part of who I am today.
we are not our past. It's part of us, but it's not who we are today. But Karen, I have a question for you about identity, because I do think that there's a very strong parallel between, especially with women, men also, but with women, that we do not know who we are. We do not know, and that's where the spirituality comes in. We do not know that we are the daughters of the Most High King. We are born with purpose and identity. And, we are formed in our mother's wombs with a purpose on this earth. And I think once we actually get and come into agreement with that, then something shifts. Then I think that codependency might shift a little bit. But I think most young people do not know who they are. There's the identity crisis, not just here in the United States, but everywhere. That's why it's so easy to compare ourselves or think we need to look like that or do what they're doing. No, no, no. We have two thumbprints, two, and not even my own two are the same. So we are uniquely made.
That is so true. And I like the fact that you hit upon the purpose, because I think that we do all have a unique purpose in this life. That's why I was saying earlier about taking a look at hindsight for our lives. No, not a single of all the 8.5 billion of us have the same timeline. We all have a very unique timeline, and the purpose for each one of us has been unlike the purpose for anybody else. I think people who are kind of lost spiritually fail to realize that actually they do have a purpose that's unlike anybody else's. And, I didn't have any real spiritual program when I was a kid. I didn't, we weren't a family that went to church on Sunday, really. We went to church twice a year, maybe Easter and Christmas. And we didn't pray before meals. And it wasn't an anti-Christian family. Or an anti-religious family. It just didn't practice any of those practices. And so it wasn't until I came into AA that I began to have a spiritual program. And that wasn't easy for me initially. In fact, the writing of Each Day a New Beginning resulted as because of my trying to develop a relationship with God, because I did not have one when I came into AA. And I realized that everybody else around me seemed to have this relationship. When I think about the unique purpose, I think that the fact that I did not have a relationship fed right into the unique purpose that I had in this life, because I was supposed to struggle in the way that I struggled so that I would, in fact, begin to write to God, so that that first book would end up become manifest in my life. And it led to everything else I have done since then. So I think that the purpose for me was tied very closely to the fact that I did not have a spiritual program when I came in. Not every day do I feel God's closeness, but I don't doubt God's closeness. I'm absolutely convinced that God is as close as that God is my next breath, as a matter of fact, even though I sometimes don't feel aware of that. And I think that doesn't matter as whether I'm aware of it or not. God is never going to abandon me, even if I don't feel that presence. I'll never be abandoned. And that's what gives me great comfort.
Saying that even though like you may not feel God, you still know He's there. What does a woman do when she cannot hear that voice yet, or when the quiet feels empty instead of full?
Well, I think that for me at least, because I've experienced that and still do, I just remind myself. It's as simple as that. I just remind myself that God is present, that I needn't worry, that God is as close as my next thought, that God is my next breath. I just talk to myself. I have a little visit with myself. And I think that that's what the main thing that all of us can do when we're not feeling that presence. We just remind ourselves that it's impossible to be separate from God. It is impossible. God is as close as we are for each one of us. Every breath each one of us takes, that's God. That's the presence of God in our life. It's impossible for it to be any other way. And when we are not breathing any longer, then we become spirit. And we're very much still a part of God as spirit. That's one of the things that I learned in the Course in Miracles, that the truth about us all is not these bodies that we carry around in this chaotic classroom. The truth about each one of us is that we are spirit. And we are, and so when we quit breathing in this classroom, in this capacity, we needn't worry about breathing any longer. We have become totally immersed with God. And that gives me great comfort too. God is never going to leave my side, whether it's here in my study or whether it's in my next experience, which will come after my final breath in this life. Then I will be breathing God in a different way.
Yeah, there's a beautiful scripture about that. Not by might, not by power, but by your spirit, Lord. And I think for us strong women to surrender to that, ooh, that's not easy. But I think there's such freedom the moment we go, your way, God, your way.
Yes, I like that. Your way, God, your way. Yeah, because that fits for every step of our life, from the earliest childhood until at age 87. God, your way. I love that.
Beautiful. You are such a blessing, Karen.
Well, we're all blessings. We're all blessings. And that's the beauty, I think, of life. Every one of us is a blessing in the life of everybody else.
I was going to ask you about after decades and decades of helping people heal, what do you know for certain about life? And I think you kind of answered that.
Well, I know for certain that there is a God present to each one of us. I know for certain that we do all have a unique purpose, as we've already talked about. I know for certain that whatever is supposed to happen in any one of our lives is going to be introduced to us. I know for certain that that my life is being fulfilled every single day by the opportunities I have. I know for certain that the opportunities that are coming to me are coming to me uniquely as my own opportunities, as not as anybody else's opportunities. I really believe that my role in life is uniquely my own. I do believe that my job as a writer has been quite intentionally orchestrated. I believe that God orchestrates the life of each one of us. I think we sit here right now together talking, and there isn't anything in your life, in any of our lives, that hasn't happened exactly as it was supposed to. Even when it was something tough, even when it was something that didn't feel fair at the time, I think that it fit into the bigger picture of our life. And I think that that will always be the case. Right now, I have some real health challenges in my life. 6 years ago, I was diagnosed with a lung disease called non-tuberculosis mycobacterial disease. And it's not a disease that anybody can catch from me, but it's a real serious lung disease. And I have to take care of it by using a pounding machine on my chest every day and doing nebulizing every day. But you just adjust to whatever those changes are. And about 8 months ago, I was diagnosed with leukemia. I mean, I look at that as not, oh, poor me, but as this is simply a challenge that I'm supposed to embrace. And who knows where it's going to take me, but it's going to take me to where I need to be next. And I think that that's what we can look at in our life for all of us, no matter what it is. And additionally, I have glaucoma really bad and I have very restricted eyesight out of my right eye. Well, I mean, though none of those conditions are life threatening from my perspective, but they are things that have certainly affected my life, but they have affected my life in the way of helping me to turn more to God for for understanding and for help. And I think that anything that happens to any of us, if the result is that we are pushed more in the direction of God, that's the good news. That's the upside of the experience. And so that's how I look at the struggles that are the challenges that I have had over these last few years. They've just pushed me closer to God. And maybe I just wasn't close enough to God before. And I don't want to think that I don't look at any of these struggles that I've had as God saying, well, I'm going to do this to Karen because she's blah, 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 blah. That's not how it works. We all just have things in our life, and God is always there to help us handle. That's one of the things that I have learned is that nothing is too big for God to handle. And if I am feeling overwhelmed by something, it's only because I have forgotten to invite God in to help me handle it.
Well, Karen, you're so full of wisdom and hope and just the beauty of a life lived well. What do you hope your life's legacy will be? I mean, you have 30 books that you're leaving this world when you go to be with God. But what do you hope your legacy will be like?
Well, now I have to correct you because it'll be more than 30 books.
That's
Because remember, I haven't
31.
stopped writing. I think that this is one of the best books, maybe the best book I've ever written. And, it's near and dear to my heart because, of course, I am aging and hopefully peacefully every day. Some days are maybe more peaceful than other days. But this book is really designed to help people handle whatever struggle they're having in their life. Because when we age, life is about struggles that we hadn't counted on. And so when I started writing this book, it really was to help me in my own aging process. People are feeling like it has given them hope. They really can handle whatever is confronting them. They understand that whatever is confronting them is coming within the helpful hands of God. And that doesn't mean that God is causing us to have struggles, but that God is very present to help us with whatever our struggles are. And I have believed that for forever. But, in the aging process, it becomes maybe even more paramount in our lives. So I'm real pleased with this book.
And
Oh,
is
that
that a
is
book for
beautiful.
any age?
No matter whether you're 30, 40, 50, 60, everybody is aging and
Hmm.
everybody's life is changing. So it would be helpful for anybody at any age, actually.
Well, Karen, I think I'm going to buy that for my parents. My dad is turning 90 next week.
Oh my
My
gosh.
mom just turned 90, and I'm sure they're going to love it.
I
And
think they will. That's incredible.
Yeah.
Love it.
Judy ordered it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's one of your very best.
Right. I hope that my legacy really is simply that she lived a good life. She showed that she believed in God. She made a partnership with God throughout her life, and that she cared about people. I that's really all I want to leave behind is that I really cared about people. I really want to think I've made a difference on an individual basis, like to my friend Alicia across the street. I want to think I made a difference in her life when I see her outside and say, "Hi, Alicia, how are you today?" I want to, I want to, when I go to the grocery store and smile at the cashier, I want that to make a difference in her life. That's that's the kind of difference, the kind of legacy I want to leave, that people think of me as somebody that actually allowed other people to know that they mattered, that they truly mattered in this life.
So, Generations Woven exists because we believe women need each other across every age and season of life. I was reading that you lived that and sought that out. You wrote down words of wisdom in the book Keepers of the Wisdom, and you went around and you interviewed different people of different ages. I think it was between like 50s and 80s, and you just asked them questions about life. What do you think one generation loses when it stops listening to the one that came before it?
I think that's a great question. I think that we lose that beautiful connection that actually exists between generations. There is a connection between generations that is soft and touching and hopeful. And I think that when I interviewed all of those people and sat down with them and said, "Tell me," and my husband and I traveled around the country and talked to people, as well as people who lived in the neighborhood. When I just would say, "Tell me what has mattered to you in your life," and to just listen to what they had to say, and then to write meditations based on what they had to say. It was I was so touched by it. And so I think that that's what one generation leaves to another generation, that kind of touching. We're always touched by the honesty, by the sincerity, by the softness of the answers that we hear from other people. And so when I interviewed those people and they shared with me what was important to them, I mean, I was just so moved. One woman that we interviewed, her name was Alpha English, and she was an African American woman down in Arkansas. She had written a book about people in her town. She had been just an amazing human being, active in her community, and it was a tiny little town, really, but she was so active in her community. But one of the things that she said is that every day has a surprise in it, just like a Cracker Jack box. And I never forgot that, because I loved how she put that every day, because every day does have a surprise in it. And I thought, what an interesting way to put it. And I think that if we just honor those messages from other people, our lives will be changed. And I think that that's what one generation passes on to another. Those words that can just give us a different way of looking at our own lives in that moment. And when Alpha said that, it was like, oh my gosh, I hadn't thought about it that way.
That is beautiful. Karen, well, speaking of words for other people, we did a podcast last Friday. We actually recorded 5. And it just so happened that Judy, just before we came together, found this absolute beautiful, and it's in one of your devotionals. And she sent it to us, and I'm going to read it because it fits so beautifully into that specific episode. I'm going to read it to you because you wrote it. But we looked at it and we thought, is this a coincidence or what? And I mean, we don't believe in coincidences, but this is how it goes. If we could rise above the full picture of our lives and see how all the events have so beautifully knit themselves together, and if we could catch even a glimpse of those which are to come, we would be completely at peace. We have woven a beautiful tapestry combining of all the colorful events of our lives, and the tapestry's full beauty has yet to be revealed in its completeness. It was beautiful. Thank you for your beautiful words.
Well, thank you. And that is I love thinking about every single experience every one of us having as adding another color to the tapestry of our lives. And until that last experience of our lives here, that tapestry is not complete.
Yeah.
And I love that.
What a joy you
Beautiful.
are.
So, Karen, you've written those 30 books that we've talked about this whole episode, and you've changed so much over the last 50 years since you've started your transformational journey, your sobriety journey. But what is it that Karen Casey still wrestles with today? What is something you still are struggling with?
Well, I guess I would say, and I mentioned this a little bit already, I still, because I don't have that constant awareness of God's presence. And I don't know that I would call that a struggle, but I would like to feel the arms of God around me constantly. I know they're there, but I would like to feel them. I would like to just literally feel those arms around me. And there is a fellow that goes to my Saturday morning AA group, and he's a Native American guy, and I just love this guy, and he's got many, many years in recovery. And every now and then, when he shares on Saturday morning, he talks about he's always felt that presence around him. And he'll kind of hold his arms like this when he says it. And I realize, you guys, I'm kind of jealous because I'd like to feel that same constant presence. Like I say, I don't doubt the presence. I know it's there. I know it has to be there because I'm still breathing, but I would actually like to feel it in a different way.
When you mentioned when you were born and your mom had really struggled with the pregnancy and, and you always felt that you were clinging to mom. Do you think, and I'm identifying with you, I want that feel that closeness all the time too, but do you think it's because of our past and our yearning to be held, to feel safe?
Oh, Judy, I think that's a brilliant interpretation. I think you're absolutely right. I think that could be it. So, you know what I think I'm going to do? I think I'm going to start envisioning my mother holding me. When I say my prayers, I'm going to start envisioning my mother actually holding me because that feels right. Thank you for that.
Well, I could identify with it. That's the reason I wanted to bring it up. So,
That rings true to me. Instead of my clinging to somebody else, let me think about my mother hanging on to me.
And I just want to say this is absolutely, I don't want to say one of my favorites but it is. I think the wisdom that we get from somebody that has lived a life well, and that wisdom is not just for you, it's not just for me, it's not just for Tasha and Judy, it is for our children's children. And to hear what you have done and that you're not done yet, that is such a beautiful picture of hope that when we breathe our last breath, that's when we're done. So thank you
Yes.
so much for coming on today.
Oh, thank you. I've so enjoyed this.
At 87 years old, with a life that almost ended, and instead changed millions of others, what is a message you want to leave for the next generation of women seeking recovery, self-empowerment, and learning about their own codependency?
Well, I guess the real message I would like to leave others is never give up. Just keep moving forward. Keep trusting that the God that's very present in your life has a mission, has a purpose for you. I had a lot of stopping off places. You make reference to when my life almost ended, when I uh, almost took my life, and Pat knocked on my door and changed all of that many years ago after I'd been sober about a year and a half. And had she not knocked on my door, and her visit was supposedly to deal with finances with me, which was laughable. I lived in $100 a month apartment. I had no money to speak of. And but had she not stopped by, had she not shared with me what she did about reaching across this abyss that I felt in front of me for the hand of God, I would not be here today talking to you all. And so I think that what I want to leave to other listeners, to other women in the future is that don't ever give up. We always have the next day. We always have the next moment. We always have the next assignment. Our lives are filled with assignments that are not only for making our own life better, but for impacting the lives of all those we're going to touch throughout throughout our experience. So, life is um, life is a journey with many stopping off points, and every stopping off point is filled with joy as well as sorrow at times. But every one of them, as I've already said, every one of them has played its part in that long life that we've had, and only hindsight explains to us what everything has meant. So what I want to leave for other people is don't ever give up. Just know that every next moment has something special for you.
Well, thank you, Karen, for 50 years of showing up, for the words that helped millions of women wake up and not feel alone. For our woven ones, your action this week is simple. Ask yourself, where am I still looking outside of myself for something only I can give me? Codependency keeps us chasing, but purpose brings us home. So sit with that. Until next time, God bless.
There's an invisible thread that ties us all.